All right, so back in the spring of 2014, the Tigers were trying to work out a deal with Max Scherzer. He was coming off of a Cy Young performance, had really fully come into his own as a pitcher. They were trying to get a deal done with super agent Scott Boras, who was known to have had a really good relationship with Tigers owner Mike Ilitch, GM Dave Dombrowski. They had done some big deals before, like the Prince Fielder contract. A lot of people expected that to get done. It didn't. Now, I wrote about this recently on the site, but we're going to look at it in a little bit of a different manner today. What might have happened differently had that deal gotten done? That's the topic of today's video. Of course, we have many more already done for you to watch, and we've got many more to come. If you go down and subscribe below, you can access all of our prior stuff and keep up to date with everything coming down the pipe. So this was one of those classic spring negotiations. We've seen it happen before. We've seen it happen since. Star player entering his walk year. The sides line up. They all are saying the right things, but it just falls flat. Now, sometimes when that happens, there is a press release of some kind, or both sides will go talk to the media a little bit. In this case, there was some really unusual sniping. The Tigers announced that they had tried hard. They made an offer to make Scherzer one of the highest paid pitchers in baseball, and he had declined. And so Boras responded with his own that was, we made an offer that you declined. It was sort of like a, you can't fire me, I quit sort of a thing. The opposite, yet exactly that anyway. The sides agreed, we're going to go through the season. We're not going to talk any more contract. And that was that. Reportedly, the Tigers were up to something like $144 million, which was the prior extension that Cole Hamels had signed, sort of the market level at that time, but probably low for Scherzer. So as a result, we had Scherzer landing on the Nationals in 2015. Remember, at that time, the Nationals were an extremely heavy favorite to win the NL East, be a World Series contender already. The Tigers were still seen as one of the premium teams in the American League. So this was a big swing. You're looking at a guy moving between two of the biggest contenders in baseball. Of course, the Tigers ended up trading for David Price during that 2014 season, so they kind of got their own replacement ready to roll, and the stage was set. Now, here's the thing about that Nationals team, though. Remember, they already had a stacked rotation. This deal actually bumped Tanner Roark out of the rotation. He had been very good the year before. So you had Steven Strasburg already in-house. You had Gio Gonzalez, Doug Fister, who of course had been acquired from the Tigers. And then now you are going to add Max Scherzer to this mix. Oh, and there was one other guy. That's right, Jordan Zimmermann, a longtime Nationals player, sturdy veteran. The Nats had already talked with Zimmermann the prior offseason, just when the Tigers were talking to Scherzer about a new deal, a long-term contract, and the sides could not see eye to eye. In the spring of 2015, it seemed like maybe there would be one more last-ditch effort at trying to hammer out an extension until Scherzer signed. That put another big contract on the books in the long run for the Nats, and it made it quite a bit less likely that they were going to ever work things out with Zimmermann. At the time, he said, hey, I'd be willing to talk about a deal, but it'd have to be fair. Otherwise, I'm moving on. That's exactly what ended up happening. So had the Tigers retained Scherzer, let's reimagine their 2015 season a little bit. We can't do it entirely, but it was a disaster. It was a calamity that year. But if they had Scherzer, that team would have been quite a bit better. Maybe at the very least, they would have hung on at the trade deadline that year instead of dealing away Price. And Dave Dombrowski ended up obviously being canned in the middle of the season after that trade. It completely changed the complexion of that organization. Maybe with Scherzer playing at an extremely high level as he did in DC, that team would have hung in the race longer. Maybe Dombrowski never leaves. Of course, he was replaced by Al Avila, who's still the GM there in Detroit. And Dombrowski ended up in Boston with the Red Sox, where he eventually re-signed David Price to his new team after Price had been traded to the Blue Jays in that fateful summer. There were so many things going on. Of course, the Tigers did attempt to compete again in 2016. maybe they wouldn't have signed Zimmerman. Maybe then they would still have Scherzer on the books. Maybe that team, which did come in second place in the division, would have been a postseason team. If you take out Zimmerman's rough season and replace it with a Scherzer ace-like campaign, who knows what would have happened. Again, the entire complexion, the entire trajectory of that organization would have been different if and when the rebuild did finally come around, as it probably still would have, even with Scherzer around. It would have been awfully nice to have that contract on the books. Remember, we'd be talking about an even cheaper deal than the one he eventually signed in DC. And this is one of those rare free agent contracts that has had big value throughout the contract. You hope to get good performance on the front end and then deal with a little bit of pain on the back end with a big deal like this. Not this contract. Every team in baseball would have given up big value to get Scherzer at those terms, well, if they could afford it. And this contract would have been something the team could have swapped out for prospects. Instead, they're stuck paying Zimmerman, and there's really nothing they can do to move that deal. So as it turns out, with Scherzer in DC, you have David Price signing with Dombrowski's Red Sox. That whole thing could have looked totally different. The Nationals would have been a potential suitor for David Price that winter if they didn't have Scherzer already. They also might have thrown more money to try to get Jason Hayward, Yoenis Cespedes, or Justin Upton, who ended up signing with the Tigers. Lots of different possibilities. They may have ended up with Zimmerman themselves. Hard to say, but there are so many possible butterfly effects of this particular situation. I'm curious to see if you can think of any others. Drop them in the comments if so. And please do make sure you hit the like button. That's always helpful. And subscribe, because these are super fun. We've got a lot more videos just like this planned for the coming months.